Loud. So again, in week 4, we have with us special guests, 4 of them tonight, talking about makerspaces. I do not think any of my classes over the decades in which I've taught any course has ever talked about makerspaces or had a guest, well, at least had a guest about makerspaces. We did have Kylie Pepler in 678 who was doing something, who created a makerspace lab in Indiana, or helped create it. So I take that back. So we've at one time, Kylie was a IU Bloomington School of Ed professor. She's now at UC Irvine, and she does digital textiles and all sorts of interesting kinds of things. So I highly recommend you look up Kylie, Peppler, Kylie Pepler, if you're interested in this space of active learning. There's another person named Mimi Ito, ITO. She talks about working with inner city kids in Chicago and Los Angeles and other places to get kids interested in after school projects and having them geek out, as they said, the whole language of teenagers with technology. And I think Tina probably can relate to that. She's probably has more rural students trying to, that's not necessarily geek out, but have fun and get excited about STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, and maybe STEAM, adding art in there too along the way. So Tina was a student in one of my classes last year, and then now this year's in the dissertation prep course. She's come a long ways in the program in instructional systems technology. She's almost ready for the qualifying exam. And right after that, the dissertation, the big D project. I'm not sure if she's going to do her dissertation on the makerspace, but I'd imagine that that will be the case. Tina, can you tell us a little bit about your background and what landed you such a job? I mean, where, what the mission is, who arm twisted you, or did you apply for this job? Tell us, what got you into this particular context, how long you've been there, and what the goals and so forth, and maybe you can show some things afterwards, but let's get the kind of the context first. And you're muted for whatever reason, at least I don't hear you. Does everyone else hear her? Can you hear, or am I? No, you can't. Okay. So maybe you have to exit and come back in, Tina. Not sure.
How's that?
That's it. Okay, there you go.
All right. Yeah, I was like the wrong input on, it's been weird. Anyway, yeah, so I started at Crane 22 years ago, 23 years ago.
Crane what? It's not a crane that you put build buildings. Crane, what is Crane?
Yeah, so it's the Naval Surface Warfare Center in Crane, Indiana, and I'm about 45 minutes away from IU Bloomington campus, so right down I-69. We're actually a Navy base in Indiana, so it's kind of weird that we are a Navy base in Indiana. We're the 3rd largest Navy base in the world. And so if anybody on the Zoom call has been to Indianapolis and you've taken 465 around Indianapolis, the land area inside 465 is how big Crane is. It's huge.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
It is huge. We started as a depot for weapons and ordnance is stuff that goes boom. And and the reason that we are so big is that they want the ordnance to not be on top of each other, because if one goes, you don't want everything else to go. That's the way they started, but now we do we're a full up Navy lab, so we do research and development on a lot of different things, so like night vision and small arms and radar and what they call electronic warfare, so listening to communications and trying to keep people from listening to your communications. And we also have something called the Mobile Technology Repair Complex. And that is where engineers and scientists are paired up with what they call a special operator. So a special operator is like your Green Berets, your SEALs, and we're teamed up with them. And we get I haven't been through the training, but the scientists and engineers get 4 weeks or 6 weeks of training on all kinds of makerspace kind of things. So like 3D printers and sewing machines and welding and shop equipment, and just anything that you comes to mind. So there's 6 weeks of this intense training that they go through, and then they get paired up with these special operators, and then they get deployed to a forward operating base. So Afghanistan, Africa, South America, and then they work for 6 to 9 months in theater, and the warfighter comes to them and says, "Hey, we're having a problem with this, this, and this. Can you make something for us?" And they have all these tools at their disposal, and they make the thing. And that's kind of like the segue where the idea of, hey, we should do this for kids. I mean, not deploy them. We're not going to deploy kids, but like have them use all these items that they have to learn how to use in theater. So that's how we kind of came up with that idea.
You ever see them shooting off rockets and bombs and that? Do you have binoculars and watch this?
I've been out to sea.
You have, okay. So are
Yeah,
you a civilian or a Navy person?
I am a civilian, but
Yeah.
I've been shot off an aircraft carrier, which was pretty cool. Uh,
Wow.
yeah, I climbed lots of antenna masts. I had to go out to sea to test one of our systems a few times, and like the ship was like, we can't turn back. So we had to like uh climb off the side of the ship on a rope and get boated back in one of those rigid hull inflatable boats. And so yeah, it's
You got
been
a
pretty
lot of
cool.
stories to tell.
Yeah.
So does Crane is the city? It's not an acronym. I thought maybe it was an acronym for the Navy of something, computer registered da 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 Crane, but it's a real city. Do they have a lake at Crane that can actually put boats in? I think they do have a lake, right?
They do have a lake.
Is it big? I mean, is it man-made? What?
It is a man-made lake. I can't remember how many acres. But the nice thing, like they do exercises on it sometimes.
I mean,
We
do they
have
have giant boats? Do they have these, USS Kennedy there or anything like that?
we have
No.
pontoon boats, and I
Oh,
can take my kayak
okay.
out there. Like really, it's just for employees to have fun.
Yeah.
But every once in a while they do testing on there. Like the one lake that we use for testing a lot is not on that base. We have another offsite facility near Sullivan, Indiana. It's called Glendora Lake, and they do a lot of testing out there too.
Okay. So
Yeah.
since we don't have a lot of time tonight, why don't you tell us what you're doing with Makerspaces there, why you set the Makerspace up, and what's happening?
So why we set it up, like I said before, when I first started that MTRC, and then I read a lot, and this is before I enrolled in the EDD program. I read a lot about makerspaces, and just the hands-on learning with and as an engineer, I guess I didn't start that's my background. Like I'm an electrical engineer, and that's something that I always wish that I had, was more hands-on time with things. So in engineering school, you learn a whole lot of theory, and not a whole lot of hands-on stuff. And I wanted more hands-on time. And I felt like if I had that time, learning what a resistor was and how to use a breadboard. Maybe I wouldn't have struggled so much in engineering school. Maybe it wouldn't have been so hard for me. So, and you know, it's fun. It's just fun. And the other aspect was that it seems that if you have an after school STEM activity, the first thing that will probably pop in your mind is robotics teams. Like, let's do an after school thing, and it's a robotics team, whether it be FIRST or VEX. I used to do something called Sea-Perch, was underwater robotics. And if you look at the metrics for robotics teams, they are overwhelmingly white male. And girls, I don't want to say girls don't like to do it, because you do have girls and they do like to do it, but overwhelmingly the girls are like, nah, you know, like STEM equal robots, so therefore I don't like STEM. So we wanted to do something that was a little more STEAM-ish, where you could use your creativity and do things. And where I'm at, nothing against sports, but that's like king down here. You know, everybody likes sports, but there doesn't seem to be a whole lot for kids who aren't into sports. And so we wanted to give an opportunity for those who maybe sports wasn't their thing and maybe robotics wasn't their thing. So we started out with Makerspace, like an after school Makerspace, 7 years ago, 8 years ago, I think. And we learned a whole lot from those 7 years, to now. And right now we don't have the after school Makerspace. It seems like COVID kind of took its toll on Makerspace, and you know, we had to kind of shut it down for a little while, and people weren't I don't know, eager to get back to it. But we've kind of done another incarnation where we have interns now, and they do the Makerspace. So it's different than the after school thing, but it still gets used, just in a different way.
Is it still teenagers?
Yes.
Do you have some slides you might want to show us what it looks like, what the space looks like?
I didn't bring slides.
Okay. Do you have a website you can call up?
Yeah. Hold on one second.
Sure. Is this space in Bloomfield, or is
yeah.
is it on the crane base, or it's a base?
No. So actually it is right off the crane base. I don't know how familiar you are, but right like a half a mile from the crane base, there is a tech park. And in the tech park, there's an academy. And it's supposed to be like this learning academy for all local universities, what have you. And I have a spot in this academy. So the whole point is so that people don't have to have all these credentials to get in.
Does Crane pay for it?
So I'm gonna say I'm trying to well, it's Office of Naval Research who pays for it.
Okay.
And yes, Crane pays for my my salary, and then I also have a what was I gonna say? I have I'm trying to multitask. I'm not very good at it.
What percent
But
of your
I have
job?
a website up, but I have we have two assistants, two teachers to help out, and we also do field trips and that kind of stuff. So I'll show you the website that we made, and it's not pictures, but it's our website. I'm going to share here. So what we try to do,
Do I need to make you a co-host, I wonder, or?
let me share, it seems.
Okay.
Let's see.
Yep, okay.
Okay, so we when this was an after school thing, we called it Crane Tech, because I don't know, that might be a kind of unimaginative, but and what we tried to do was set up a website so that you know, when we started, we had all these people and we were like, hey kids, do whatever you feel you want to do and whatever makes you happy. And I had these really open-ended things, and I actually consulted Dr. Pepler about, you know, how do we do this? And I don't know, we had a lot of kids and they were just kind of looked at as like a deer with in the headlights, like, we don't know what you mean. Because they're just so used to sitting at school and the teacher say, do this, this, and this. And so that whole just do what you want thing. And how he would was it William? He was talking about instructables. I tried to show them instructables and look at all these projects that the kids can do. And they just needed to be guided a little bit more. So we made this website, and it's a work in progress. Every year I have the interns kind of work on it. And as you can see here, it's like, here's some ideas for stuff, you know, I'm stuck. Here's some ideas, and you know, learn a new skill, make something. And then what I tried to do is I tried to make like badging levels where they you know, for electronics, and here's some levels, and this is what you need to be like a level 1 electricity. Same with 3D printing and programming. We tried to do elements of the Coder Dojo. I don't know if they're still doing their thing at all. But this was my way of just kind of guiding them a little bit, instead of just do what you like, you know. And that was kind of a big mistake. I found that you can't just do these things.
So you discovered that discovery learning doesn't necessarily work. Guided discovery works. At
Right.
least when you're uncomfortable or unknowledgeable of an area, sometimes you can let kids just free for all and explore, you know, learning. So this course is on learning environments. That's why I'm getting back to that. So to create effective and functioning learning environments, we need some guidance, some templates, some scaffolds. And you want to go back to the website again? There's a couple other things on there I want you to show us.
Sorry if I start coughing. I'm just getting over some crud, so I have my tea here. Okay. So I tried to do some miscellaneous projects and giving them some ideas for like, and this is where I called in instructables. These are links to instructable projects. And then let's see, programming ideas, and then I tried a blog. And this is where you might be familiar with this, Dr. Bonk. This is what I did for your 678.
Right.
Yeah, so these are the different things that we have. I tried to do like a little video guide, in that, you know, you have additive manufacturing and subtractive manufacturing, and you know, electronics and 3D printing, and let's see, the laser cutter. We tried to do that, yeah, our laser cutter. And that's kind of where we left off. And then I put some things on there about competitions. Maybe they would want to enter. Maybe competitions are what gets you motivated. And so I put some competitions on there. So it was just like my idea of trying to do a little bit like sampling, like maybe competitions are your thing, maybe more artsy things are your thing, maybe more programming is your thing. And it seems to help. What I'm doing now with my interns, I have interns in now, and they are seniors in high school, and we started this program last year, I think, where we have seniors in high school who have a little bit of time in their schedule, and they come in Monday through Thursday from 12:30 to 2:30 and learn the makerspace. They learn about Crane. How does this makerspace tie in to engineering, and just kind of guide them through, what do you want to be when you grow up? Like what it is, what do you want to do? Do you like this engineering? Do you even like this engineering thing? So what we're doing now, and I tried this this kind of a new thing, is the first week I have them and remotely, just to do some training, and then this week they're in, and I'd have them make a Rube Goldberg, and they had to use at least 2 3D printed parts, 2 laser parts, and 2 sensors and that Rube Goldberg. And it seems to be working very well. It's like they have to use the Makerspace.
Since we're running close to 8:30 here, why don't we see if there are any questions from the students here? Do we have any questions posted to the Jamboard?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So did anyone want to make a comment for Tina? Yeah, go ahead, Tiana.
I have a question. So Tina, you said that there's a space down at Crane where other universities can collaborate. Is there information on the website on how we do that? Sorry.
So they have IU, I think, has a space, USI, and the whole building is run by Purdue. So hold on, let me get you.
Is it Westgate?
It's Westgate, yeah.
Okay.
So you're familiar with that then, Tiana?
Yeah, I'm familiar with Westgate.
Let me. I'm putting a link in here.
Yeah. Any other comments or questions?
So I have I actually have 2 rooms in Westgate, and I've been there for probably about 10 years. And now it's kind of like a big hub down there. And you know, what they're trying to do is bring all the universities together and kind of, I don't know, do a group hug with Crane and Purdue and IU and all the other universities.
Okay, we're going to transition from rural Southern Indiana to little less rural Southern Indiana here in Bloomington. I want to thank Tina for coming in tonight. Let's give her a round of applause as well. And a big thank you for coming in when she's not feeling 100% or maybe not even 98%. So I thank you for your fine efforts in the Makerspace as well as in our class, Tina. I'll see you tomorrow night in the other class, and hopefully you're feeling better on Tuesday night. So we're going to switch to Justin and Chaoran. Justin Whiting was my master's student 14 years or so ago, and my TA in R546 instructional strategies class. And I was so delighted when he decided to become a doctoral student, and he's been a doctoral student for a while since, and has taken a position, I think, at in Boise or something. Maybe you were working, maybe not Boise, maybe it was Idaho.
University of Idaho, just for a little bit, but
yeah, not in Pocatello, not in Boise. What city were you in?
It was Idaho Falls.
Idaho Falls, right.
Yep.
And then he's down in Salt Lake City working in a healthcare organization that may be connected to the University of Utah, but maybe not.
Somewhat, but yeah, it's its own entity. But yeah, Intermountain Healthcare, and I've been there 5 years now. It's crazy how time goes so quick, but I really like it.
So Justin has the first article for this week with Seth Martinez, which is the article I also used in R511. Again, I'm going to teach R511 in the spring. I just found this out along with 795 dissertation prep. He has an article this week, Designing Informal Learning Environments, which is in a book by Richard West and Jason McDonald, who I'm going to meet both of them at AECT in Las Vegas next month and interview them about that book. And I'll post that interview to this class so you can read that. So the book chapter that Justin has is in a free book for all ed tech people that Rick West, who's BYU faculty member, and Jason McDonald might be a grad student.
He's also BYU faculty.
He's faculty. Okay.
Yeah, they're both great.
Yep. So Justin was here in Bloomington just as Kylie Pepler was getting the funds and others were getting the funds to create a makerspace, and he decided to maybe stay another year and then work in that makerspace lab, or maybe a year and a half. Actually, was it a year or a year and a half you worked in that space?
Well, it was basically a year of planning and helping to design it, and then help work with that. And then I managed it for the first year as well. So yeah, it was really a couple years working there. It was really cool. So it was a lot of fun. I'm happy to talk about that. So
yep. So we'll get to that. And as he transitioned to Utah, we needed someone else to run it. And I think, Chaoran, you may have been the manager. You were working in there as a GA, but in effect, you were the only one in that lab. So you kind of took Justin's place. Is that right, Chaoran?
I was a GA, yeah.
The one who worked the most hours, from what I can tell.
Yeah, I stayed there almost every day.
I'd always see her working very diligently because both of them were working 10 steps from my office. And Chaoran graduated, she defended a year and a half ago or so her research looking at students who are learning English in rural parts of China, getting synchronous instruction once a week from more urban areas to central and western China. And she studied that process in effect and has a chapter in my recent book, Transformative Teaching Around the World. So Chaoran went off to Colby College, is in their writing center as both a tenure track instructor, as well as maybe the director of their writing lab, or something, maybe not director. What is your title exactly?
I work with multilingual international students, so assistant professor and multilingual writing specialist.
Yes, that's much better. Okay, thank you for that. Up in Maine, where it actually was boiling hot this summer, you could boil a lobster in that heat, and now, according to the paper today, boiling lobsters is off limits. Someone wants to protect lobsters; they become fished out apparently. And the state of Maine is not too happy with that designation today. And Justin is over there in Utah, where it never has fires and never has droughts or any of that stuff. No, they're losing half of Salt Lake is actually gone or something, right?
Yeah, it's the lowest recorded levels ever. I mean, it's crazy. And I live really close to the Great Salt Lake, and yeah, you can look out and you just see sand for a long ways. So yeah, there's some real concerns about water out here right now. So
where's your water supply coming from?
We're on a little bit. I think we're separate. It's not the Salt Lake, but I live in the valley, kind of on the other side of a mountain range from Salt Lake. So even though I'm only about a half hour from Salt Lake, we're in it's called the Twila Valley. So anyway, it's a concern for sure. There's definitely a lot of the slow the flow, try to get people to not water their grass so much this year. And just, the Salt Lake for sure is drying up, and that affects a lot of migratory birds and everything else. So yeah, it's kind of a big deal out here in California and other places. I know are getting hit even harder than we are too. So It's kind of
Too-
crazy.
Too big a state to put a border wall up and keep people from coming there. Everyone wants to move to Utah, and such a beautiful place, you know.
It's growing like crazy.
Yeah, and a lot of high tech industry moving to Utah in particular.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of companies that want to move there because people live to be the longest in the U.S. There's some counties in Utah they live to be the longest. And so, yeah, if you want a clean lifestyle and want to live a long life, go to Utah and visit Justin. So I want you two guys I don't know if you have any pictures you can show us of the lab in Bloomington, any slides or anything. I didn't ask you at a time. Chaoran's shaking yes, you do. What about Justin? Do you have anything?
No, I don't have anything from that right now.
Okay, so let's have Chaoran show some slides if you have them, Chaoran. And so
I don't have slides, but just pictures.
go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah, and then we'll chat about them.
Okay.
And Justin is coughing. It must be a thing tonight. All the guests are choking and coughing here.
Yeah, I have some pictures which I just found from my Google Drive.
Right.
Some of them are taken in the lab. So for instance, this one is a lantern that I made with the Makerspace, the laser cutter. So if you go downstairs to the second floor of the Mail Makerspace, you can still see this lantern, I believe. Yeah, and so some of the laser cuts projects, for instance, I showed here on the right. That one I designed it for incorporating language learning with Makerspace. So, for instance, the Chinese characters. It's hard to learn, especially hard to write for second language learners. So I was thinking if I can turn it into a making activity and a game. So I designed this quiz, this puzzle, and then I put that into Adobe Illustrator and use the laser cutter to cut it. So I was showing, because I was interested in incorporating Makerspace learning with language and culture learning. So the first project has to do with the culture aspect. The second one has to do with the language learning part. And I was also, when I was working at a Miro Makerspace, a few people and I, so my colleagues and I, so Xintian and so you know Xintian from
Right.
Yeah, learning sciences, which I believe is now part of IST, and yeah, and with some two other science education PhD students. So we and Dr. Maltis, so who directs the Makerspace right now. So we write a grant for design a workshop for migrant children, kids in China. So we actually went to China to offer a 1 week workshop. So the purpose of the workshop is to incorporate e-textiles into the STEAM learning. So we designed a workshop specifically for girls because as Tina mentioned, there's really a gender gap in terms of STEM learning. So we try to make it STEAM learning for young girls. And we make the head design workshop. So you can see here, I was trying to glue the head that the students designed. So they are learning math and geometry and circuits, electronic circuit knowledge through the head making activity. So
it sews. Does it in the Maker Lab you can sew things?
Yes, they have sewing machines and also 3D printing stuff. So this is a picture of the workshop that we designed. So still 3D printing, laser cutting. And this is the 3D printer in the Mill Lab, another one. And this is the Glowforge, which is the laser cutter that I used a lot. So as someone who has to, actually, I don't have a background in maker learning. So when I was hired in this position, I had to learn a lot by myself. just watching a lot of YouTube videos in order to figure out how to use the machine, and then teach other people and make instructions, the guide, the manuals. So this is another machine, but I think it's so you can see here it's a 3D potter, so you can actually print a vase or some pottery from this machine. But I believe it's now hosted in the art school or department. So
That's right. You made
stuff,
glasses.
yeah.
I remember you made glasses.
Yeah. That is my very first trial with the 3D printer. So that's a very quick showcase of my pictures.
We might have you go back to it in a second, because there was a lot you showed very quickly, like the machine itself. There are various machines in the room. There's one that's more of lasers, right? Could be fire hazard. Is that right?
Yeah.
IU maintenance people or someone got worried about starting a fire in that room, I think at one point. Wasn't that right, Justin?
Yeah, we had some smoke. People wondering about why is there so much smoke coming out of here sometime, but yeah, it vented out. But then, yeah, we had some people worry about that sometimes, and I know that was one of the questions kind of as I was leaving, was trying to decide, like, do people need to get like certified or take a course before they can use some of the machines? And that was always the balance of, we want as much access as possible, but of course still being safe. But I think one of the other cool things about, speaking about the tools that were there, I mean, it's great to see some of those other new tools that we had, but also even just things like, razor blades and X-Acto knives and a drill, things like that we were able to do so much cool stuff with those when like elementary school kids would come in and, they were able to just use, razor blades and X-Acto knives to cut poster boards and then make 3D buildings or things like that. So there's the high-tech stuff, but also some of that low-tech stuff was just as useful for creating cool educational experiences for everybody.
They never cut their fingers or anything like that?
No, and it was one of the neatest things that I saw was, got to see Professor Bowling basically give a master class on how to use X-Acto knives and cut poster board, because she has done so much of that, and even professionally in past in her art experience. And she was showing these like 7th and 8th graders on how to make sure you get lined up exactly where you want to cut. Don't stand off to the side, because then your cuts will be wrong and things like that. But yeah, it was neat. But yeah, I mean, obviously we always try to make sure we were being safe there too. It was fun.
Chaoran, did you have any hazard things happen when you were the GA? I mean, or people who are concerned still?
Yeah, I think it's more from the Makerspace, we encourage people to try making things their students or faculty members, but sometimes students will bring a file and say, can you help me print this? This is what we discourage, because we want the visitors to try learning by themselves. And if they have any questions, we can support them. But we always feel a little bothered if they just ask us to help them print or to cut, or without themselves even wanting to try those tools.
So what were the age groups that typically used that in the School of Ed facility?
When I was there, one of the neat things, was kind of just kicking it off and getting it started. They did some faculty grants, and Dr. Maltese was one of them that started, along with, there was an art grant and different things like that. So there was definitely, all of the IU students, but they had several of the classes from the project school there in Bloomington. So there was 7th graders that came at least a couple different times and did some of those projects, like I was saying, with the just cutting and things like that. So we had 7th and 8th graders come at least a couple times, and I don't know, if other elementary school kids have come since then too, but we had middle school kids come and use it for sure. It was a lot of fun.
Chaoran?
From my experience, I don't have a direct experience working with young learners, but IU school, I believe it's the Office of International Students, they actually brought the Boy Scout groups
Mm.
to the Makerspace lab to have us to design some workshops for them. And those are some of the direct experience I had with students. But I was also in part of supporting faculty part. So it depends on what kind of learners they're working in their classes. For instance, I want to support a class that is designed to help literacy teachers to find creative ways to incorporate technology or makerspace into the class. So I supported the faculty member by showcase the lab and show how we design these some of the artifacts there, and think about creative ways that they can design a lesson plan that can be used into their classes. So it depends on the setup of the professors. That's the faculty support part.
And so we had William Kanye come talk about his dissertation, looking at the Make Schools project and trying to connect OER to makerspaces, trying to look at to what degree do all these makespace schools share their designs. And he didn't find much of it. The only sharing was the final product, take like a pictures that you just showed us, and maybe comments or reflection papers on it, maybe a gallery of it. Did we go beyond just taking pictures of their projects and maybe storing to actually sharing the designs?
That's a great question. I know that Anna Kuna, Dr. Kuna now, I think she's in, I forget where she's teaching in Europe somewhere. She was one of Dr. Pepler's students. She did some pretty cool things of taking like 360-degree pictures throughout the whole design phase. And we posted some of those. So, we definitely shared some of those pictures online on different blogs and things as far as going through the process of designing it and everything. I don't think we ever did anything like as far as like sharing the blueprints or things like that. That would be really interesting. And I have no idea like if IU would be open to that or if any of those were proprietary and things like that. But definitely there was some sharing of, hey, this is the process of where we're at and how we started, especially in that first year. Because it took us a full year to even, from when it opened to get fully stocked and everything like that. But yeah, I think my assumption is that more of that will happen now in the next, 5 to 10 years, because everybody was just kind of getting started right now because it was, still fairly novel ideas. And so everybody was kind of trying to do it on their own. But now there are some more well-established organizations and places around that could really, post some of those resources. I know that there have been, toolkits or things like that that have been shared of here's how to start a makerspace as far as the tools and things like that. But yeah, that's not surprising that there wasn't a whole lot of, sharing going on so far. But my guess is that will happen more in the future.
Yeah, I agree. So any questions? I have a few more for you guys, but I want to make sure that the students who are left here from tonight, anyone want to jump in and ask Justin or Chaoran a question about makerspaces?
So I have a question. So were students required, because I know, so I'm in the Luddy School and we have a makerspace in our living learning community. And so we have students equipment, and especially that laser cutter. Are you all doing this? Did you all do the same thing in your lab?
I don't know what currently is going on. And if I'm understanding, are you asking like if people have to like sign up to come use them or things like that? Is that what you're asking?
No. So Dr. Bonk had asked about safety when you're talking about, I know you had said something about fires and things, and that people who are going to use the laser cutter have to take before they use it.
Yeah, Chaoran might be able to answer that better. When I first started, we really were trying to push more, hey, let's have it open as much as possible, get people access that they could come and use it. But there was definitely pushback from, administration saying, no, we want to limit it a little bit more and like only have people come when there's a GA there. So I'm not sure exactly what the situation is right now. Chaoran might know better, but yeah, it was a balance for sure of trying to figure out how to get people as much access as possible, but still keep it safe and, managed well.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Justin. I remember the year I went there. So the first year I worked at Makerspace, the Glowforge is actually a new machine. So they used to use the full spectrum, so a lot. That machine is a little more, you have to really monitor and stay in there all the time in order to see if there's a fire. But I remember the more advanced version of the machine, that one is more safer, I would say, compared to the earlier version. So I remember our guideline is that whenever you print something using the laser cutter, you have to stay there until your project is finished. So laser cutters, usually it finishes the project faster than 3D printing machines, because that can take for 8 or 10 hours to print something, but laser cutters, normally you can finish it quickly. So we require all the visitors to stay there and watch the machine. And besides that, I was thinking about one particular thing we were really worried is the waste of the materials, because when, especially in terms of laser cutters, when you bring a piece of wood or acrylic, so visitors like to just pick a new complete piece. So we really try to encourage people to recycle and try to design your piece and see if you can fit into that small chunk of the wood and just for environmental purposes.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point, and that's something that we talked about, I think, in that article, is just kind of the idea of access to informal spaces. And we really had to kind of push and hope and change some of the perspectives, especially of some of the administration, as far as access. Like we had one person come in and like just on a tour, and they were like so concerned about, well, how do you make sure that somebody's not going to come in and take this can of WD-40 or a screwdriver or something like that? They're like, we need it to be really locked down. You're like, wait a second, like we've spent a whole lot of money to design this overall space. At some point, you don't worry about the $2 screwdriver, right? You know, it might wander off and you buy a new one. It's not a big deal. Like that's part of running it, because if you close things down too much, then nobody's able to use it. And so that was something that we always really had to say, yeah, obviously we don't want somebody come in and stealing, you know, one of the 3D printers or something like that. But yeah, you don't want to only have it open for 1 hour a day and not have anybody use it either. So that was something that we really tried to push for. Say, no, we want it to be as open as possible. And like even with designing it with the glass wall in the hallway, you know, that was very much on purpose so that people would see it and want to come in and not just, you know, not hide it away and not let people see it. So that was very much on purpose.
So there's a tension here. We're in a learning environments class. We have a tension here between openness and being more in security. And so there's a natural tension here between the freedom that we give learners to explore and to express themselves and to be in an open and flexible environment, and the assurity that we get with a closed environment of safety and no hazards, no risk. So the risk cost debate, or the continuum, is something we have to consider as you do final projects, as you do your midterm projects, and you think about the principle that you want to include within the learning environments that you're evaluating or that you're potentially designing. These questions, these differentials between cost, and risk and safety and security, our safekeeping selves versus our risk-taking selves, is alive and well and on display behind a glass wall in these maker spaces, and the excitement that happens from producing. So we got into participatory learning earlier, Justin, or contributory learning that Kylie Pepper talks about, from these more open-ended spaces. They have tremendous potential, but there's also the old guard that had the way that they were taught, and the way, and if you screw up in any way, that means there's a wall burns down or something on accident happens, they'll can the whole project. So you have to be real careful between how far do we take risks, how far do we go, because if we slip up, all the naysayers that say it's not going to work are going to come out real quickly and tell you, hey, we already told you it wouldn't work, and there's proof of it, and we better stop funding this kind of stuff. So, that's not just for makerspaces, that's for all educational technology. There's always people on both sides, always waiting with bated breath to say, hey, we told you so. Justin, you want to come? Megan has a question, and Gal has a question, but Justin's shaking his head yes. So Justin?
Yeah, and the other thing that was just such a stark contrast, when I first started, you remember, Dr. Bonk, I got there in 2008, right as they were kind of finalizing that podcasting studio there as part of the IST department with Dr. Appelman, that's directly across the hall from the Makerspace there. And like, again, they spent all this money, put in top of the line equipment for this podcast studio, but administration and people were so worried about the equipment's going to get damaged and stuff that they didn't let anybody use it. Like, you had to sign up for it, and it was, behind the door, didn't even have a window in the door, so nobody was even hardly knew it was there. So, basically within just a few years, they had turned it back into a classroom, and I don't know what the state of it is right now, but it was kind of frustrating because we had all this really cool stuff, but they didn't let the students use it. They made it very hard to take advantage of it. So we wanted the Makerspace to be the opposite of that.
Yeah. So I've been doing a podcast show for 2.5 years now,
Yep.
And I'm being nominated for something. It's more scholarly in nature, and to make sure people don't talk about the podcast show, and we just want to talk about the research that you're doing. I'm like, scholarship is, anyways, there's all this. So Bob Uppman, who created that podcast studio, is the one who created this class, Learning Environments Design. So I'm teaching this class, and Tom Brush has been teaching it for the last few years. And I've always wanted to teach this class because it's like the intersection of all my classes is about the creation. As Justin knows, I tell people I'm a learning environment psychologist. And I don't believe in cognitive theory or behavioral theory or social theory or constructive. I believe in all of them in some degree. They all work. Every day they all work. And so a learning environment design course is about figuring out what pieces and components you want to put together to create the most effective and powerful structures for learning to occur. Megan's had a question for about 10 minutes now. Megan.
My power went out briefly. My Zoom froze. It's just been one of those nights. So I might be breaking up.
Tiana had it. I had it. Tiana had it. You've got it. I think there's something going around here with the Zoom virus here tonight.
There is. No, it's not even so much a question. It's just I've really enjoyed learning about this, more. And I've worked with Tina. I know she's not here anymore, but over the last few semesters on and off, I've been in classes with her. But now actually taking this course, and especially this week, I was moderating. And so learning and reading a little more about this, especially in the STEM field, I find so interesting in high school and things, and being able to get students. And I was trying to ask a question earlier when Will was on about which professor that was, which math professor. So I love all of these ideas, and it's sort of, making me want to switch my dissertation. I'm not going to, but not at this point. I've done too much research, but I'm like, man, if I'd taken this course in the beginning, because it would be so interesting to know, with makerspaces, especially in K-12 or high school more so. I think younger grades might be a little hard, although maybe not. I think it would just be really interesting to see how that influences students. As I teach math, I've taught math in both high school and college. So I just would love to know how these makerspaces in K-12 would influence students, liking of math specifically. So anyway, it's really cool.
So do you have
thanks for sharing, everybody?
Yeah. Do you have thoughts, Justin or Chaoran, about exciting kids into math and science through makerspaces?
Yeah, I think just kind of one of the things that was really cool with those faculty projects that I mentioned that I got to help out with is there was math education, there was art education, where kind of like Tina was saying that they had to do some aspect of the makerspace, and just really, really cool projects that the students did. And even just things in math education, allowing kids to say, hey, we're going to learn about 3D figures. Let's print our own. What color do you want it to be? And letting kids actually have a say in it was even just little things like that are huge.
It would be so cool. Okay, I just had an epiphany and a light bulb. Even when I taught calculus, and we would talk about, we'd look at surface area, right? And we'd talk about these formulas. I would always say, I'm like, don't memorize the formulas. Think about, for example, a cone or a sphere, or, think about how you would dissect that shape. And I would actually like rip it up in paper. I was like, how fun would that be, right? Learning in geometry to actually print it and create these things. Sorry, I get excited about math. But how can we get more kids to feel like I'm totally like, how do we get more kids to do that?
I think
Get excited.
from my experience, so we designed that hat making workshop for 5th grade Chinese migrant girls who are 5th grade. So they're pretty young, and so after we actually did the survey, so before the workshop and after the workshop. So they expressed that after the learning from our workshop, they're getting more interested in math learning, because they're seeing that the formula or the math they're learning is making sense. So it's not just some knowledge from the textbook, but the math helps them to get their projects done and make the hat that suits their head very well and into the shapes that they want. So when they see what they're learning is making sense and can actually be turning into an artifact or an artwork that they appreciate, they wanted to do. So when they see that process, they're getting more motivated into learning. So that's my experience in terms of working with young kids.
Week 14,
Love it.
Dr. Hee-Jun An, she may be coming in an earlier week. She has 2 articles, and one's called Hands On, Minds On, Hearts On, Social On, a collaborative maker project integrating the arts in a synchronous online environment for teachers. It was just published in Tech Trends this month, this issue. So Justin, you got Tech Trends, take a look at that. It's just out. And she has another article on implementation of learning by design in a synchronous environment to teach robotics to in-service teachers. And she'll be a guest. So you make sure you ask her those questions. She's dealing with math ed as well as STEAM, art ed, and other related projects at William Patterson University in New Jersey. So near New York City, she is. So Ga has a question. And by the way, does anyone else have a question? We're just about done for tonight. Nicole or Xiaoying, do you want to ask any question as well? Nicole?
Yeah, I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead before
Yeah,
Ga goes.
first.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, first or me first?
Yeah, for you first.
Okay.
Put your
Thank
camera
you.
on if Justin can see you, who you are.
Okay.
Yes, my former TA, Justin. So
Yeah, thank you for sharing your experience about Makerspace. I have a question that for younger learners or maybe even adult learners, when we as an instructor organize a specific manual activity in a Makerspace, is it more suitable for one-on-one teaching than guiding for a group of students? Because of the complexity of such as step-by-step manipulations or learners' different levels of learning ability. Yeah.
great question. Great question. I don't want to answer that. I'm letting Sharon and Justin take that one. Yeah. What do you think?
So if I understand the question right, are you asking if maker spaces are as good for kind of one-on-one instruction as well as other kinds of instruction as well? And yeah, that's a great question. And
Yes.
I think the answer is yes to all of the above. It can be. It's not like a maker space automatically is going to make better learning, right? You could have a terrible learning experience if it's not set up well. If you started a semester-long art class and you just said, okay, you have to go use the Makerspace, but you never gave any guidance or structure to it, is probably not, if you're just forcing it to happen, with no real reason behind it, yeah, it could be a real negative experience. But yeah, I think for sure you could have some really interesting mentoring, one-on-one model kinds of things in there. Definitely, I think the majority of what I've seen is more small groups, and and really creativity always kind of comes to the front when you're talking about maker spaces, just because of the materials that are available in a makerspace that are not normally available in other places, right? You have, even just duct tape or markers and things like that, or fabrics that you don't normally have. So, but yeah, I think absolutely it could. But yeah, I don't, it's not like it would automatically make it better, but I think having access to other things is going to be a big deal.
Ron?
Yeah, I would say both have some advantages. So for my experience, I think collaborative learning is happening a lot from my experience of trying to making the makerspace work for me. I learned a lot from my the people who I work with, and also from my students as well, because sometimes they're really creative and I didn't even think about maybe bring a paper or these other materials into their design. So they're really very creative in terms of intertextualization things and in terms of the design and the thinking. So I learned a lot from others as well. So I would say sometimes we try to, especially from when I design the workshop, I try to also make it open-ended. So have some options, maybe introduce some basic tools, but leave the space for the learners to explore by themselves and collaborate on projects.
So I want to thank Nicole for coming. Nicole, you might stay for my answer first before you have to duck out, because this might be the last one I give. Thanks for Nicole for coming in from Johns Hopkins tonight with a couple others. You have to think about, Xiaoying, we give feedback. There are only 5 forms of feedback. And I just made that up, by the way. There's only 5 ways you can get feedback. You can get instructor feedback, peer feedback, expert feedback, self-feedback, and system feedback. Feedback from a human being is costly. So when you ask that question, is it best, do Makerspace serve you best for a one-to-one or one-to-many kind of experience? It depends on the humans that are in the loop and how much those human beings cost you. If you're able to recruit prior students who've finished Maker Lab experiences to come back as interns, as what Tina was saying, she has interns, that maybe doesn't cost so much money. If you bring in back experts into that loop, that could be, or other instructors, maybe having 2 instructors or 3 instructors teach a class in a makerspace to get more directive feedback. That's gonna be very expensive. But you didn't ask about cost, you asked about effectiveness. And so effectiveness comes down to pedagogy. As Justin knows, who took 540, who was my TA in 546, Chaoran took 546, the creativity techniques, the critical thinking techniques, the collaborative learning techniques, and all the motivational techniques you can, and technology integration techniques, you embed. Some are very low cost and highly powerful and effective. So it really depends on the pedagogy that you have put in place. If you model for the whole class on the front end and maybe create tutorials for people to branch off and go to individual workstations, they could self-teach through those tutorials that are reusable contents. Once Justin creates that tutorial on how to do a particular or a Chaoran in a hat making activity, that hat making activity is now of no cost. The first time it costs a lot of money. The first time the approach might not work so well because there are some bugs in the procedures. So that might not be as effective doing that. But the second time around, that same approach might be highly effective. You fine tune your tutorials, you fine tune the scaffolds, or the ways in which peers are giving feedback, or the manner in which self-feedback is happening, or when it's going to occur. So whether or not Maker Labs are ineffective in large group settings may not really be a critical question in the long haul. The first time you're doing a makerspace activity, one-to-one is probably undoubtedly going to be much more effective and powerful for learning, because Justin can give pointed feedback to each individual student, but it's going to exhaust him. And so he has to create certain things like the job aids on the wall, or the guidebook, the manual that might be, Chaoran creates a guidebook on how to do the hat making activity, or these templates that William wants to share between maker spaces and they can learn from those templates. All those things happen over time. So like teaching this class the first time, I know I'm not as good as the second time or third time, but third time I should be pretty good at it. But I stole a lot of notes from the prior instructors, so I'm halfway decent this semester. This is going better than I thought. because I'm utilizing a lot of stuff, and Sume really helped me a lot in designing. She saved me 3 days before this went live. She said, "This is an awful syllabus. You need to make this thing better." And so I worked hard the last couple of days, and we made it really good. So, that question, it's got a lot of what ifs. Anytime you ask a question about, is this better than something else? There's a lot of caveats in everything. Online and blended learning is better than face-to-face. There's research that shows it, but there's a lot of caveats in how people design those blended environments or the time they put in creating that. So it's a really good question. It's worth researching, but if you research that, you can't overgeneralize the findings because it's all contextually based and all dependent upon the students that you have, their familiarity, the risks, even the parent support that they might be getting, or the excitement that their parents might show at home in those activities, or grandparents. All these things and other things you might not even think about in designing the research are going to impact on the effectiveness of that particular environment. Even the acoustics in the room. The acoustics in the room might impact whether the students can hear you on the far edges of that makerspace, right? Or how hot it is in the room. Students might not pay as much attention if they're boiling hot and the fires are happening in California. They don't have we don't have air conditioning in Oregon because the fires are going across the state. In Eugene right now, the internet's out and all this stuff. And in parts of California, you don't have air conditioning. They're in their basements in the coolest part of you go to a makerspace and you have that problem, it's not going to be effective. So there are environmental issues, psychological issues, support issues, or psycho-emotional. So it's a great question. I got to answer in a long-winded fashion. Nicole, thanks again for coming. I know you need to duck out, but I thought you might like to stay. Nicole, you have a final comment you'd like to make? You're muted. Go ahead.
Yeah. I just thought it was really, really interesting to hear. And I learned a little bit about makerspaces before, but not to this extent. And it was really interesting to hear all of the presentations tonight. So yeah, that's I didn't have any other additional comments or questions. Yeah.
Well, there's much more to learn, and go to Kylie Pepler's website and buy her books. It's not just about makerspace, it's about all sorts of making activities. Justin, is it digital textiles? Is that?
E-textiles.
E-textiles and robotics and makerspaces and all sorts of in informal environments. She's at UC Irvine. She's got technical reports she did for foundations. I forget which particular foundations that Carnegie, or I forget which ones they are, but reading those will inspire you, I think. Ga has the last question. Nicole, I know you need to leave, so it's okay if you duck out. Ga, you asked the last question. That will be it for tonight.
Okay, I'll be short. I think after reading the articles this week, there was one thing missing from almost all the articles. How do we measure learning? It seems that nobody is interested in measuring learning in Makerspace. So I have the question first, do we even need to measure learning? And I have a famous quote from one of the professors I've got who, if you can't measure learning, then learning didn't happen. So I don't know if it's right or wrong, or you can debate on that, but the first question is, do we ever need to measure learning in a formal setting of learning? Second one is, if so, how do you measure learning in Makerspace?
I think my answer, and then I need to run as well to get my daughter to volleyball practice, but it's just like an art education class too. How do you measure something like that? There are quantitative ways, and certainly a whole lot of qualitative, experiences that you look at. But yeah, it's a great question, and I think it goes back to one of the, kind of that previous mention of the dissertation studies, that too, a lot of this is still relatively new, and assessment is hard. There's no two ways around it. As I'm an instructional designer in healthcare, and that's what we talk about all the time. And assessment is always, it falls down to the bottom of list of how do we do it? How much time can we spend? So I think it's a great point and a great question. Yeah, we need more of it for sure, but you can do it. But yeah, it's a challenge.
I'm going to add something before Justin leaves, is that when we look at learning, we also have to look at emotions, and we're going to have to look at the well-being of our students. So we can no longer just, and that's why learning environments is this course. It's the whole environment, it's the whole human being that we have to think about. And just to pin things down in terms of how much they learned might be doing a disservice to the students, and pointing out the things they didn't learn instead of what they did try to learn, their attempts to learn. Thomas Edison had thousands and thousands of failures before he invented the light bulb, right? And I just read his book, his biography, you know, and the 1,000 patents he had, every single one was a failure many times. And so we just want to measure learning. We're going to, you know, there'll be, you know, many failures along the way. I have many publications that have all been a failure. They've all been rejected, most of them anyhow, at some point, many times. And so, you know, if we're just measuring learning and whether it occurred or not, we're actually doing a disservice, because that's an end state, and learning is always a process. Learning is always ongoing. And so to look at it as an end all and be all, whether or not we need to compare it to something else as an end all and be all and say, well, online learning is not as good during the pandemic because kids' reading scores went down. Well, there's a lot of things that happened that saved kids from dying because of online learning that people are forgetting about, and got to spend some time at home with their parents, hopefully in a good way. Most of them, maybe some was stressful, but you know, they learned something about themselves as an independent learner. They learned something about self-directed learning that we're not measuring with those reading test scores or the writing test scores that everyone wants to pin things down based on those variables of the past, instead of thinking about the variables of the future. And what are those variables of the future is dealing with ambiguity. That's problem finding, not problem solving to some degree, but problem finding, mess finding, and being innovative in one's approaches and flexible in their mindsets and not giving up. Those are just as important as the reading test scores or writing test. Reading is important. It's critical. Don't get me wrong. We don't want kids in a cycle of learned helplessness as a readers, not approaching. We want to find ways to get kids to approach reading, not give up on reading, say I'm a bad reader, right? You know, or a bad writer. I was told by my first grade teacher, told the second grade teacher I was no good at reading, writing, and all that. So I wanted to prove them wrong. In second grade, I did 120 book reports. Now, not every student out there is going to try and prove their teachers wrong. They might accept that negative reader connotation and give up, and then a cycle of learned helplessness. Well, the same is true when we have these studies that compare the learning outcomes of each student on a platter and say, these kids are going to be the crows, these are the larks, and these are the sparrows, you know, and the crows are no good. We're not going to do much with it. We can't do it. We got to only work with the larks and the eagles and all this stuff. And it's constant comparison, is a constant. And instead of comparing to others, we should just compare to ourselves and look at improvement scores over time, look at growth over time and the possibilities for growth, and where the strategies were ineffective, where one's strategies are ineffective or study skills were ineffective. And study skills can be taught. Learning can be taught. The metacognition or approaches to monitoring, they can be taught. You know, my daughter was taught how to schedule and write things down in a planner. She was, you know, not doing so well in early elementary, but today she's an occupational therapist. Every morning she gets up, I see her at 5:30 in the morning doing her plan, and she learned in like second or third grade, you know, all these planning skills and outlining stuff. So those things can be taught, but that's not learning. You know, that is meta memory. Those are survival skills in this age. Knowing how to synthesize, knowing how to distill evidence, especially knowing how to separate opinion from facts today in today's highly dense, unfactual world that no one wants to fact check anymore. And so these skills are critical, and also how to deal with other human beings on a humane basis, how to treat each other in a kind and caring manner. And if you're going to be critical of ideas and help someone then provide the support to reshape and fine tune and build on and those ideas, instead of making it always be a combative world. So that's my take on your question. Chaoran, that's why I jumped in before Justin left, so at least to give him a taste of what I had to say. Chaoran, did you want to try that an answer?
I'm glad no one measured my learning in Makerspace because I failed so many times. As I just shared with you, I Googled, I looked up a lot of manuals and YouTube videos in order to learn how to use them. Because no one teach me that, and I've got so frustrated whenever the machine is broken and I have to fix that up before I can, because Dr. Maltese, sometimes he knows how to do that, but sometimes he also doesn't know. So we have to all figure that out together, and a lot of frustrations. But if I measure my learning, the process, I give it probably C, because it's not very productive. It takes me a long time. But in terms of the learning outcomes, I'm very happy with it. And my persistence, I feel I got stronger through learning. So I'm happy with the my work and my learning experience there.
Well, Tron, give me double high five. Okay, everybody look at her hands. Hold them up, hold them up, hold you.
Oh,
They are not burned. She didn't burn her hands, so she wasn't a total failure at Makerspaces. So I just get, and she learned from the technology that wraps around her, and that's what people do in a self-directed learning world. They learn from the videos online or the resource supports and tutorials, or watching other people if you can, and so that is increasingly going to become the norm of education, is going to be utilizing those resources that wrap around us in an informal way, so as to help us out in the more formal settings that we're encountering. These are great questions that we have tonight from Xiaoying and from Megan, from Tiana, and from Ga. Sunmei, you haven't said anything. Do you want to have a final comment? Not a question, but a comment from tonight.
Comment?
Yeah.
Actually, other people asked a lot of really good questions. And then actually I'm learning, Makerspace, today. That's because frankly speaking, I heard a lot, but I didn't know about it. So just this time I tried to understand, what is there, what is good for. And then actually just to, Megan mentioned that I have a high school, children. So I really want to, introduce those really creative idea to the, public school. But just I'm concerned with the Makerspace. That's because I think the 3D printer is expensive, I think. So how to bring that idea to the, former, environment, especially in public school. So I'm just curious, but I don't want to ask you. That's because it's really hard to answer. I think there are a lot of things we have to consider, right? Yeah, first of all, price, security, and then who will be in charge of, Makerspace, that's because I think the end is to we need some specialists, right, for managing that one. And then just to teachers can voluntarily work for that, or hire someone, so a lot of things are going on, in my brain, and then I don't want to ask them. But just I really like this idea. It's really good for children. Maybe in the future we can figure out how to introduce that idea to the formal environments. Just to nowadays we are learning a lot from informal setting, right? So maybe we have to try just get a really good idea to the formal environment. That's my comment.
Megan?
I was just gonna say, shoot me an email. I'm happy to chat more with you about it, because yeah, absolutely, I love it. It's such a cool thing.
My daughter doesn't like PC, AP calculus.
Yeah.
She's complaining.
So, God, I didn't want to downplay the learning question, because I'm a learning psychologist by training. I majored in learning and human development, both, though. And I think we have to start attending to the human development side as well as the learning. I think learning is very important, and there are different ways to measure learning that aren't the traditional fashion, and getting incremental, looking at learning over time in small bits, in effect, and looking at the outcome, what people are able to do with that training. Can they replicate? Can they create something as a result of that? Not necessarily repeat what they've done, but reuse, remix, extend all these R words and redistribute all these. Can they get into more of a creative mindset with that training and design something that's useful to their class, to their school, or to society as a whole? I think we'll end with that comment and just point out that next week, in week 5, I think we're going to have Tom Reeves come in and talk about his article from week 1 about authentic learning. And his 2 colleagues have the authentic learning book, Harrington and Harrington. Christiane Riley is the other author with Tom Reeves. She's in Germany right now taking care of her sister. She's going to try and come in late at night at 12 or 1 a.m. in Germany. I haven't heard for sure or not. So we're going to have a couple, we'll have one interest, maybe 2. Tom Reeves has done 3 books with me. He's one of my top colleagues in the world. So hopefully we get them both next week. And the week after, Shamim Farouk will talk about corporate-based learning environments as she makes her way to Bloomington as part of her Fulbright scholarship this year. She's from Malaysia, working for Maybank, and her father is a IST alum as well and a big exec at Maybank. So we're going to hear from a couple of interesting people in the next 2 weeks. We'll see you again next week, and have a great time in the online discussions. I'm enjoying it. I'm going to stop the recording now. Let's see if I can stop the recording. Here we go.